met a guy on Tinder and we really started to hit it off. We'd been chatting for a few weeks and even discovered we had a few mutual friends. I was pretty intoxicated one night and was feeling social and decided to call an Uber to his place. Once I got there, we talked outside for a while and ended up vibing even better in person. I opened up to him about my health problems, and he opened up to me about his older sister who had passed away from a similar condition to mine. I was curious about his sister, but I definitely didn't want to pry. We walked into his house, and it smelled like 1,000 dead rats were rotting under the floorboard. I was still pretty drunk, so I tried to forgive it because, hey, some animals die under your house or in the walls, and there's nothing you can really do about it. I start to look around, and the whole house looks like a clustered storage unit. He takes me to his room, which is seemingly normal, kind of feminine, but whatever, and we hook up. I ended up falling asleep there and woke up around 10 a.m. to the stench of death. I opened my eyes, feeling very sober, and I started to look around the room. I noticed that only girls' clothes were hung in his closet, so I start to assume I've possibly been cheated with. Then I see a giant black binder on his nightstand. When he woke up, I decided to jokingly ask him, "What's in that giant binder?" Turns out, it was every single episode of Golden Girls printed out. He said he even read it at work, and it's the only show he'll ever watch. Huh, okay. I asked him what he did for work, something I definitely should have known by this point, but he dodged the question. I sat up and looked at the pillow I'd been cozily sleeping on. It had no pillowcase, and it was covered in what looked to be old blood. It looked like the blood had been coughed onto it. That's when I started putting the unpleasant pieces together. I asked as sensitively as I could, "Hey, was this your sister's room? I noticed the clothes in the closet." That's when he says,
"Yeah, this is her bed. I haven't changed or washed anything. It just makes me feel better to be in her bed. This is actually where I held her when she died, and you remind me so much of her. I really, really like you."
And then he casually tried to hook up with me, like he didn't just drop unsettling news. I felt immensely sorry for him, but I needed to get out of there, so I made some excuse and I left. I decided to not entirely ghost him because of how bad I felt for him. He was clearly dealing with some really dark shit. We kept in contact for a few weeks until I went on my Find My Friends app and noticed that he had clearly taken my phone while I was asleep that night and shared my location with himself. I immediately called him and I went off. This was not my first rodeo with a stalker type, and I was not dealing with it. He told me he couldn't believe I thought he would do that, and that I'm being a really terrible person, dumping him because his cat had recently died. I just blocked him right away. After he said that about his cat, combined with his tendency to hold on to things, it really makes me wonder what that smell actually was. Let's hope not. And though I hope he gets help, let's not meet again. So I've been on Grindr for about 10 years now and have had plenty of fucked up experiences. This one in particular reminds me when I was at a party without my car and my phone was at 10%, but a decently hot Grindr guy said he would pick me up and we could hang at his place before he drove me home. So of course I jumped at the opportunity. Anyway, we got to his place and he got me pretty drunk. That's not unusual for me, but he never tried to make a move. I assumed he was just gonna wait and just convince me to stay the night later on. After my phone died after what seemed to be 2 hours, and I didn't even have to say anything before he noticed it was dead. Then he stood up and was like,
"Well, let's go to the car then."
When I asked if he had a charger I could use, he just said no. After we got in the car, he kinda got quiet and less flirty, and I spaced out a bit just enjoying his music and looking out the window. I didn't even notice that he never asked me where I lived until I realized we had been driving for over an hour, not even towards my town, but into the canyons, and I asked where he was going, and he just said,
"I thought we could go for a drive."
And my drunk ass was like, huh, okay. So anyway, to make a long story shorter, he ended up taking us 4 or 5 miles down a dirt road with no signs or houses until a dead end into this cabin with no lights on or cars outside. That's when the dread started to creep in as I sobered up. I said I drank too much and should probably head home, but he didn't even respond. He just sat there staring at the cabin. That's when he said,
"So, you like being kinky? You're pretty submissive, correct?"
And I was like, sure, but I meant like normal rough kind of shit. Nothing too extreme or wild. He started to sound a little annoyed, and his sentences seemed to be a little less carefully worded, like he was just spitting out the bare minimum of each thought. He said something about how some of his favorite people are those who can find pleasure in pain, and like if someone goes into shock enough times, eventually it becomes like a drug, and they crave more. At this point, I was scared enough to assert myself, and I said firmly, "Okay, well, that sounds fun, but just not tonight. I just want to go home now. This place is really creepy." And that's when he sighed and gripped his keys tighter. Right as I glanced at his phone sitting in the cup holder, right before it occurred to me to grab it, he snatched it up so fast and held it in his left hand, kind of behind his head to make it clear he wasn't gonna let me near it. And then he just gave me this almost, "I'm proud of you, son," half smile like dads do when they pat your shoulder or something. It was quiet, and he kept looking me up and down for a minute or so, and then he got a little more gruff and said,
"Let's go inside. I have these friends you'll really like once you meet them. You'll feel a lot better."
Or something to that extent. But he wasn't even trying to sound genuine or comforting, like he had been doing so well earlier in the night. Finally, I lied and spoke up a bit and told him, "I told my roommates and my friend I was meeting up with you before you picked me up. I sent screenshots of your face and some of the convo. They're gonna freak out if I don't charge my phone and reply to them in the next few hours." I tried not to make it sound accusatory, but more like I was just worried about my friends going crazy, but it was clear he knew what I was implying. At that point, he let out a grunty sigh and started the car and drove away, keeping the headlights off all the way back down the dirt road for some reason. Driving back, I got nervous about him stalking me and coming after me in the future, so I tried to apologize, and I told him that I'd be down to hang out another time maybe, but tonight was just not good for me. He didn't say a single word the whole drive back, and he didn't even ask where I lived. I didn't intend to tell him either. That's when he dropped me off at a McDonald's about 40 miles from my apartment, and when I was stepping out the car, he suddenly leaned over and gave me a hard shove, so I almost fell out the rest of the way. He also grabbed my backpack off the floor and flung it out of his window across the parking lot and peeled out with the passenger door still open. Great. He broke my laptop and cracked my phone, and so I had to ask a stranger to use her charger and call an Uber. But at that point, I was just anxious to get home, so I really didn't give a shit. What's so weird is how, while it was happening, even though I was terrified, I wasn't exactly thinking about what he was planning to do with me. I just knew I needed to get away. It wasn't until I got home and got in the shower that I realized how fucked up it was and what might have happened if I'd let him walk me into the cabin. I remember being so shaken and smacked by the reality of it. It almost felt like a panic attack, so I sat down in the shower with my head between my knees and cried till the water ran cold, and I got out and woke up my roommate to tell him about it, and he sorta calmed me down. So while I still have a Grindr account, I really just use it as an ego boost. I'm reluctant to meet up with anyone from it now. When I was 15, Ray William Johnson was the most subscribed channel on YouTube. I feel it necessary to say now that he was not the YouTuber this story is about, but I feel this is important to include for context. Doing some research for this post, he was the first YouTube channel to ever reach 5 million subscribers, so he was very popular at this time. In his show, he reviewed viral videos, and as a teenager, it was one of my favorite things to watch. Every week, he picked one subscriber video to provide the comment question of the week, to which his subscribers would provide responses in the comment section. A friend and I thought we had a great question to ask and sent it in every week after filming it. By the 4th or 5th week, our video was selected and aired on that week's show. In hindsight, there definitely wasn't that much traffic coming into my account, but at that time, it really felt like it. I had 30-some messages in my message box at that time, and quite a few comments on the original video. I can confidently say, let's not meet to anyone in that comment section, garnering such classy comments as, and these are the exact quotes copy and pasted. I tapped the both of you at the same time. I would do both, and the iguana can watch. I'd totally do the girl on the left. And of course, the classic, I love you girl on the left. Ugh, gross. My friend, at the time, was 13 years old, and her message box did not look much different. Now, as a teenager with low self-esteem, I was so pleased with a lot of this new attention. I was actually taking the time to respond to a lot of my messages, ignoring the disgusting ones, thanking people for congratulating me on getting picked, and occasionally starting up a conversation with some internet strangers. One of the most common questions I got asked after this video was, "How old are you?" And of course I offered that information because, well, why wouldn't I? One specific person sticks out because he continued to talk to me, consistently. Every day I would have messages from him, and I would respond. He was just chatting, just being nice, or so I thought. He had a YouTube account, small, but had a couple thousand subscribers. Having had 11 subscribers myself, all of which being my friends, I thought it was so cool that his channel was successful. He asked me how old was I. I told him 15. He then told me he was 21. It was a pretty tame conversation, but after a few weeks, he asked me for my phone number. I'm naive. I gave it to him because he was nice and he didn't live anywhere near me. From what he told me, we live several states away. Then he started to text me all the time. He even tried calling me. It was around here where I started getting creeped out. He began talking about wanting to meet up with me. Now, at this point I'd seemed to catch a predator in school, and I started getting somewhat suspicious. I never gave him information than the state I lived in and my first name, and it all seemed innocent enough. That's when he started getting flirty and creepy and generally uncomfortable to talk to. I slowly stopped responding, ignored the phone calls, and told him I was busy. Then he found my social media accounts and tried talking to me there. I told him I had gotten a boyfriend, which was a lie, but he still sent some generally discomforting messages, especially looking back. This guy made me so uncomfortable that even thinking about it now, or even seeing his username, it just makes me feel nauseated and tense. The message that really got me, the one that finally scared me enough, and the one that I can actually remember after all of these years said, "I'm coming to Ohio, and I will find you, and when I finally do, I'm going to hug you so hard and squeeze until your eyes pop out of your little head. I never told my parents, but I was lucky enough to be able to get my phone number changed. I started getting paranoid he would find me, checking the locks, closing the curtains. I removed him from social media, changed my usernames and display names to make myself harder to find. Surprisingly, it got quiet for a while, and slowly I gained some feelings of safety back. A few years down the road, I was starting freshman year of college. I had just turned 18, and wouldn't you know, he found me again. He ended up following me on all social media, sent me messages again, and posted some comments on my old YouTube channel all at once. I felt absolutely sick. I remembered all the creepy messages and unsettling feelings and just generally breathlessness I had when he started telling me he would find me and he was coming for me. I had a brief panic attack before swiftly blocking him on everything. My profile pictures were me at my new college, wearing the gear and everything. I would have been easier to find now, and I knew that. I hardly made any friends that first year of college. I didn't leave my room much after that happened. I never went to parties, and I scarcely made any friends. Every so often I remember this experience and get sick. This is one of those times. I've since graduated. I moved far away with my boyfriend. I still check my locks and curtains aggressively every night, sometimes 3 or 4 times, even if I'm sure I've done it. What I'll never understand is how a grown man at 21 would be so interested in a 15-year-old girl, and especially still be interested after several years. Maybe he waited until I was legal. I don't know. The entire memory disgusts me. He still posts to that YouTube channel, and all I can think about is how he tried to get with me when I was a minor. He was a predator. He took away my sense of safety, and up to this point, he's certainly on my top 10 list of people with whom I hope I never ever have an encounter with again. So I got matched with a girl on Tinder. We got to talking, and we arranged to meet, and she wanted to meet really quick. I wasn't too comfortable with this, but we did meet up anyways. Everything started off quite well. She actually seemed to be a smart enough person until she suggested we trade sex stories. I felt a bit taken back by this. It was a bit personal for a first date, so I told her some made-up stories. She goes on to tell me how she's into bondage and that once she had a guy that was rubbish in bed. That's when she started to tell me she wrapped him up in polythene sheeting, gagged him, and taped him up with duct tape so he couldn't move or speak, and just left him there in his own house. He was unable to speak or do anything. For all I know, he could be dead by now. Those were her exact words. It's safe to say, I made an excuse to cut the date short shortly after.